Absolutely. Ooh.
That looks delicious.
That was lovely. That's okay. You could drink it. 'Tis the season for warm food and drinks and spices. And here to help explain the science behind them, our very own kitchen scientist, Dan Kohler, is with us.
Cheers. Cheers to some spice cider.
Wait. What are we drinking?
What are we drinking?
Yes.
I see how this. I'm
You've
not
got
going to
some
put this to
spiced
my
cider.
lips until I know.
It's totally safe.
Okay.
Smells good.
Let him go first.
But I think a lot of times we don't actually know what's, the spices that are in spice cider, the flavors of the winter.
I want to go open presents now.
Well, you're going to have to wait for that.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of times we don't know where those spices come from, right? So cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, we don't even know what they are. Okay. Let's look at them quickly because we've got a bunch here. So cinnamon actually is the bark of a tree, and we've got a picture of that. They actually slice, these sticks are formed when they slice the bark of the tree and it dries and it rolls right up.
Wow.
Next up, we've got cloves. So spices can be from the hardier parts of plants, right? They're not always the green parts. They're not the leaves. They're not the stems. Frequently they are the bark. They're the seeds. They're the roots. They come from other parts. So cloves are actually the buds of a flower. We've got a picture of that too. That's what a clove looks like when it's fresh.
Wow. Very different.
And nutmeg, which is coming up next. Nutmeg is actually the seed. It's in the center of a fruit that grows in Southeast Asia. Okay. Picture that right here too. It's right in the middle of it, and see that red wrapping that's around the nutmeg. That's called mace, and that's what we've got here. That's this yellow. So when it dries, it goes from red to yellow, it's called mace.
What do you use mace for?
Mace is a more subtle version of nutmeg. So you can smell it right here.
Yeah, I do.
Freshly ground.
Wow, nothing is wasted.
Nothing is wasted in my kitchen.
Yeah.
And finally, on this line, we've got allspice. And allspice is one of those big misnomers. We think allspice actually means in your recipe you've got cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, which is not true. Allspice is actually its own spice. It comes from the Caribbean. It's sort of a West Indies spice, and it was so named because when the British were imperializing that part of the world around the 1600s, they thought it tasted like everything. So they called it allspice, but it is actually like a juniper berry. It comes from the juniper bush.
Now, how long will...
Round one.
Round one, we're done. On to round two. Let's discuss the difference between herbs and spices, shall we?
Yes. That's what I was just going to ask you.
I read your mind.
Okay.
So herbs and spices, sometimes we use those words interchangeably. Most of the time, though, herbs, for the purpose of the kitchen, herbs refer to everything sort of that grows above the ground, right? So we're looking at leaves and stems, and the spices are the other parts of that. So we've got bark, we've got buds, we've got the seeds inside, and we've got berries that are dried. Seeds and spices really can last much longer than herbs, and that's why we use them in the winter, because throughout the summer we're using fresh herbs. They grow abundantly, but come wintertime, especially 100 or 200 years ago, you couldn't keep basil into the winter. You could dry it, but it wasn't going to keep very long.
How long are we talking?
It's a very good question. So once you grind the spices, they immediately begin to lose their flavor because the flavor is held in something called volatile organic compounds. Now, VOCs are held on the surface. They're little oil cells that are in every spice, and as soon as they're ground, they are released into the air. So I've got some cloves right here. This is why we suggest that you keep whole spices on hand as opposed to ground spices, and you get a spice grinder, because the minute you grind them, all of those oils are released. They're released in the air, and they're called volatile because they evaporate instantly. So when you have ground spices at home, if you're buying some jars of them at home, you can keep them for somewhere between 3 and 6 months. Now, they don't go bad. They're not going to make you sick past 6 months, but they will dramatically lose flavor.
Where should you keep them?
Interesting.
I'm sorry, medicinally, is it good for, do they have any vitamin components to it that's good for you? And it's medicinally, they use it for, I don't know.
Indeed, so it's interesting because historically, most of the medicines we use today came from some sort of spice or herb, right? They have lots of great medicinal properties, including some things that are toxic to bacteria, and they are antibacterial, which is why specifically in Renaissance cooking through the winter we had heavily spiced meats because we didn't have refrigeration. So spices actually helped to preserve meat. They are very powerful. They're powerful ingredients. But I was saying this earlier, the flavor compounds, these VOCs, they are oils, right? So they're oil soluble. And the way to look at that, have you ever mixed cinnamon into something and it just sort of sits at the top? It doesn't mix in, right?
No,
now the reason is because these compounds, they're oils, and we know that oil doesn't mix into water. So when you grind cinnamon, every granule of this cinnamon right there is essentially wrapped in a little bit of oil. It's wrapped in a volatile organic compound. So it's not going to mix into water in the same way that oil doesn't mix into water, which is why when we have a recipe that calls for, especially in savory cooking, we fry our spices. And I think Brooke did this earlier in the day when she was making her pasta sauce. She fried that chili, that chili powder in oil first. This is how you actually release those VOCs, those volatile organic compounds. You have to cook spices in fat or in oil in order to release those flavors.
That's why something's always spicier after it's been in the pot for a long time.
Exactly.
Yes.
What with cinnamon though? Because cinnamon is so good for you, it's anti-inflammatory as is turmeric. So how can you, if you instead of taking it in capsule form and you want to just ingest it, can
Well, you know, the thing is, when we're talking about these things medicinally, you have to take them in such potent quantities that it's not really an over-the-counter thing that you would buy at home. That's actually a different subject.
It smells amazing.
Doesn't it?
Whoa.
Because those oils are now released into the
And
air.
that's also great to do before you have a party.
That's
Yes.
the truth.
The house
Like,
smells
yeah,
like
smell-
this.
yeah.
If you go to sell your house, you should put your house to smell like Christmas.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, if you want more kitchen science, you can check out renegadekitchen.com. And thank you once again
Thank
for
you.
all of this wonderful information, Dan.
So good.
All right, next up, Lisa Gachet helps polish up our table manners when we come
Very
back.
good.